now want to get a fast-paced sense of all the different topics in relation to the longer term. I think it's important to get a sense of how you see the future and how, in particular, as captains of industry, how you can help fulfill that growth in a way in which is orderly but exciting, and how you navigate the challenges that come ahead. First of all, I'd like to go to just all of you on the panel. How do you tackle the expansion in new growth markets whilst catering for existing markets? What's going to take priority and take shape over the next couple of years? I'm going to start first with Ajay.
Well, in our case, we are, as I said, very fortunate to be in a country like India, with just its population and the way the country is growing, the way the GDP is growing, and the propensity for travel. I think after COVID, what people have realized is that they just need to get out of their homes. And Indians were typically a lot that used to save a lot of money and not spend it on frivolous things like travel and tourism and so on. But that's changed. And increasingly, they're becoming more adventurous and they need to go to new spaces. And I think it's a constant challenge to try and cater to that demand, because very often you put a single flight in a destination and then that doesn't work so well. For economies of scale, you need multiple flights. But we feel that in India, at least, that growth happens quite fast. You pick a destination, you start putting, multiple flights, and they tend to fill up. It's like, you build the roads and the traffic will come. In India, you put a flight and the traffic is there pretty much. Start a new destination. We used to say that, look, it takes 2 or 3 months to build traffic on a new flight. Now it's pretty much just weeks or even days, the traffic builds. So for us, the challenge is getting capacity, actually. For us, it's not as much about finding destinations, it's about getting capacity. In fact, with the current constraints on aircrafts around the world, with what is happening with Boeing, with what is happening with Airbus, with what is happening with the engine makers, both CFM and Pratt & Whitney, there's a massive challenge. The secondary market is extremely constrained, extremely expensive. So I think the direction to go is to find partners like Richard, partners like people in the Middle East, and see if we can not better utilize our capacity and get higher yields on what we currently do. If he flies to destinations that I might want to fly to, why can't I fly through, do a code share and fly through Sri Lanka? We need to find more creative solutions in the current environment when capacity is going to be limited for the next, I think, at least 2 or 3 years.
Richard, do you hold that same view?
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, the biggest challenge at the moment is capacity. And we work with a lot of other carriers. We're a member of One World. But I think something like 10% of our revenue comes through passengers that have itineraries that connect on other airlines. So working with partners is really important. But, it was something that Jack Welch said when he ran GE, that you need to be number 1 or number 2 in a market to make money. And I think that's even more true of the airline business. I think on a particular route or in a particular customer segment, you really need to be number 1 to make money, and if you're number 2, you might break even. And so I think, for us at the moment, we look at the markets that are strong and that are important for us. And the most important thing in this market where you're constrained with fleet is to make sure that in those markets you're strong and you have the right frequency, and you hold on to them. And then as we get more fleet, then we can think about expanding to other destinations.
Julia, so what is your sense of that travel appetite post-COVID? We had such a surge, and a surge that kind of never stopped. We just saw so much demand for travel. Where do you see the state of the consumer for business and leisure at the moment?
Yeah, well, we've looked at consumer trends, and we thought the same. Of people spent all their money now, they don't want to travel, and we're not finding that at all. You've probably seen all the research, but 70% of people that have discretionary spend want to spend it on travel. They will prioritize travel, leisure travel, above everything else. It is that search for experience over things. Can't have too many. Well, you can have too many diamonds, actually, but yeah, not too many Rolex watches. So I think we're seeing that. We're also seeing the luxury sector has grown very, very strong. Not necessarily for this room, but rail is going to be big in the US. Certainly, it's sort of an untapped market. And so those are all the positives. I think on the challenges, definitely capacity. We are expecting the biggest travel and tourism market in the world today is the US, and we're expecting China to overtake the US in the next 10 years. But capacity, particularly around China, is going to be one of those issues. And while I think Asia-Pac is very, very dynamic and very, very good at looking at visas, if you look at the more older economies like Europe, it's getting really silly now. I mean, I'm from the UK. The amount of taxes, we have air passenger duty. Heathrow's the most expensive airport to land at. Trouble with aviation, and I love aviation. I've got jet fuel in my blood, I always say. But, the airlines are fiercely competitive like Ajay, but we're living with all these duopolies and monopolies. It's not to have a go at them. Good on them, But the truth is, as you say, when you're buying aircraft, you're trying to play Bill off against Ben, and that's it. And it's, I've always thought that the competition authorities were much fiercer in our sector in aviation than they have been in some other sectors. So I think, you've got new visas coming in. The Brits, in response to Brexit, have brought in an ETA, which is sort of our version of a British version of an ESTA. So you've got Americans who really want to come to the UK, are an older demographic, and they're calling me up. They're saying, how do I do this? You think, why? Why would you put that block for your most valuable dollar-carrying customers coming to the UK? So you've got, everything's too expensive. So I think those economies have got to be really careful. And obviously the EU is sclerotic and is always tying us up in regulation, but actually not sorting things like European single skies. Why are we flying in a zigzag across Europe still? Don't tell me it's military airspace. That's not true. It's air traffic control unions. That's what it is, and we're not honest. We don't have these tough discussions, and Europe won't take on some of those difficulties, and in fact putting more in, and that is why Asia-Pacific is going, and Sri Lanka and India are just going gangbusters.
Yeah, I mean, we do see that there is the market in APAC still quite fragmented, historically speaking. I've also noticed more recently airport charges have been going up. There's a lot more costs going on to airlines to increases the cost of airfares. Do any of you gentlemen see those costs coming up as a potential threat to growth?
Well, there's no doubt that costs have come up, although I think the biggest driver of costs for an airline at the moment is all around aircraft, engines, maintenance. We go to the IATA AGM every year. When I used to go 5 or 6 years ago, your list of meetings was all the airlines you wanted to do business with. Now your list of meetings is all the manufacturers, the OEMs, the engine guys, because that's where the pain is at the moment. So we do have real challenges with costs, but it's more around aircraft, engines, and maintenance. Those are the big ones. And we all feel frustrated about the regulations and the visas and the airport costs, and we look at all of the costs. But I think the biggest ones at the moment are around
yeah, and I think you're going to see people like Embraer come up quite strongly.
What about
There's
Comac?
even a shot with the Comac. One's got to see how they do this, because at this time they have some 15, 16 aircraft flying in China. They say they have orders for 600-700 aircraft. We've been talking to them. But it is a significant challenge, and a significant challenge in the sense that they need a different mindset if they have to go to regulators around the world and share information with them and show to them that their aircraft is going to be safe. For that, they need a lot of disclosure, and are the Chinese really prepared for that disclosure? That is something that we have to see. So what happens when they go to an EASA, what happens when they go to an FAA, what happens when they come to India's DGCA. And we've offered to help them actually with the Indian regulator, because the world needs many more producers of aircraft. We need many more producers of engines. We are really praying that Pratt & Whitney gets its act together. We keep saying to Rick, the Pratt & Whitney CEO, that they need, that's a large corporation. At some point of time, they will get that engine right. But till they don't, we have a monopoly in CFM for the narrow body aircraft. And that's not good for anybody at all.
Yeah, when you go to church and you're praying for something very different than what you normally get.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. It's there's huge frustrations there, of course, around the industry. Things that we've heard over the years will be fixed by this year, and then it extends next year and the year after. It's like the status quo never changing, but we can look to the brighter side overall. And I want to move on this kind of discussion to tech and AI. I know that, Julie, you've had a lot to share, and I just wonder, for the airline's point of view on tech and AI, is there anything that's exciting you at the moment in terms of anything that you could put into your systems, or you are putting in your systems?
Well, we are doing a tremendous amount of work on revenue management using AI, using historic data that we have. It's absolutely incredible. Just to give you an example, we, as an airline, we never would overbook seats. And because, there were repercussions if people showed up and then couldn't get on a flight and so on. And then we said, okay, let's start overbooking, and we'll put one overbooked seat on every flight. And then we realized that this is, of course, not a scientific way of doing it, and we must try and analyze how many people actually don't show up for a flight, for every individual flight. And now we've got to a point that with 99.4% accuracy, we can predict how many people will not show up for a particular flight. And on certain flights, we overbook by 15 or 16 seats. So 189-seat plane, we can overbook almost 10%. And it never fails, practically never. So we've been doing all sorts of really interesting things on the revenue side, moving people up from the low-fare tickets that they've been buying into higher slabs, offering them return fares, et cetera, and it's done in a pretty smart way using data, and we are very excited by what we're seeing. We are, of course, working very hard on a loyalty program, and typically low-cost airlines don't have loyalty programs, but we think that there's tremendous value in that, and it comes at a fairly low cost, because India is actually quite the home of technology. It's not expensive for us to build those systems. For years we had these fat books that we would carry around in our aircraft, and it's crazy. Can you imagine if there's an emergency on a flight? The pilot picks up that fat book and tries to look for where the problem is and tries to find a solution. All of those things have now, of course, gone on iPads, and there are prompts and various ways in which data can be quickly retrieved and shared and so on. So it's been really interesting for us.
Yeah, Richard, what are you looking for in terms of? I mean, you mentioned something about building the holidays component up. Is that something that AI can help you?
So AI is definitely involved with that. But I think the thing is that if you look at the rate of change, it just gets faster and faster and faster. And I'm too old to start trying to control what we do with AI. I mean, let's not be serious about this. And I think that if you go back in time, your IT section was a small department in the airline. Now everybody's IT, and it's quite interesting. We've spent a lot of the last 3 years actually having to re-implement or upgrade our legacy systems. But now all the legacy systems are coming in with AI parts. We're following what customers need across different parts of the airline. And it doesn't matter whether it's sort of easing the airport experience, whether it's your chatbot, whether it's your holidays, they're all involving AI. And so I think, my job as CEO is just to let people get on with it. And people within the different areas of the airline need to take advantage. They need to see what's out there. We don't want to be bleeding edge. We can take small risks so that we learn. And the bigger ones, you let everybody else go and you follow fast. And that's what conferences like this are all about. We've got quite a lot of people here, and quite a lot of people are here taking their own leave because as an airline we can't afford to send them, because this is where you learn. And it's a bit chaotic, but there's no point trying to control it. It's the way the world is going, and our customer people will see what our passengers want, and they'll see what other airlines are offering. They'll see what's working. We'll see what's working ourselves, and that's what you build on. And it doesn't matter whether it's in engineering, whether it's revenue management, whether it's your holidays program. AI is changing the world, but it's not for me to try and control. Let the guys go out there and do it and follow what's working and use everybody's best ideas.
Yeah, Julia, what exactly are, I guess, either your members or even the hardy traveler looking for overall to help in terms of like AI or tech improve the travel experience?
It's just to make things easier, basically. You just want to do everything on your phone, passport. In fact, is it ICAO that are bringing in a system that they started, I think it was during COVID, when we all got a QR code. And I think that will mean that we just walk through airports just with, a QR code. It's got everything in there. And I remember having an argument with the American secretary who was in charge of visas in the US post-COVID. Nice young man, Alex Lasry, obviously not in post anymore. And he said to me, I said, listen, your visa policy is appalling. It's taking 15 months from someone, Brazil. I gave obviously there was the China issue, but we went all around the world. He said, well, the thing is, Julia, because of terrorism and dangerous agents against America, we have to do everything manually. I said, well, if you want to check visas manually, that's your best way of getting a dangerous agent into the US, because technology is much safer and faster. I mean, in fairness, the US have speeded up their visa systems now. But I think it's just complete ease of travel, because that's what people expect. There's AirAsia, I think AirAsia Move I mentioned earlier. It's such a fast little app. It's a real upstart. And it's, just ease of movement, really.
Today, we have 95% of people in India who web check in. Nobody checks in at the airport anymore. 95%. And this started during COVID, where we said that, look, it's going to be contactless and you need to check in on the net. And we won't even hand over luggage to the airline. There was just a space designated. We would go and keep bags there, and the airline would just send an SMS with your QR code for the luggage, and that was it. And that continues today. You're talking about fast movement through the airport. India has actually built something we call the digital yatra, or digital travel site. You can actually just walk right through the airport using facial recognition. That's it. You don't need anything at all. There's no touch point at all. Just go straight into the aircraft. So that clearly is the direction, and everybody will have to follow. And if they don't follow, that will be a competitive disadvantage. You really, when we were working on these technologies during COVID, we were quite stunned at the resistance, and I was on the board of IATA at that time. There was so much resistance from Europe and from the Americans using the security argument that, we just can't do this. So sometimes it helps to be a poor, underdeveloped country, because we can leapfrog some of the legacy technologies that others have adopted.
Yeah.
And I think it's time that the Sabres and the Amadeus and Sita and all these technologies of the world, you cannot afford to remain important players in aviation if you're not going to innovate. If you're just going to use the fact that you are the monopoly, that you have a deal with the airports, you pay them a certain sum of money, and therefore you expect to remain there forever, people are going to leapfrog you for sure, and it's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much on the horizon. Is there any kind of game changer that you've identified that you're looking to take advantage of, Richard, near term?
I think it's the AI is obviously generating all kinds of opportunities, but it reminds me of many years ago when the internet was suddenly becoming a big thing, And the airline that I worked with, the CEO at the time said, well, I've got no idea what this is going to do for us, but I know it's going to be big, so we better set up a department to look at it. And I think AI is still a little bit like that. There's so many things that we know that we're already doing. But I think actually the example of the airports and COVID is quite a good one. So I think that necessity is the mother of an invention. And at the moment, there's a huge number of ideas going on, and which ones are going to take off. It's not always clear. But I think the ones that really will make it the biggest difference are the pain points. So things like airports, I think what we've got there will gradually develop. Hopefully, we'll also finish up with one idea. I think one of the things that frustrates me now is, we talk about visas, but every country that I travel, all the places that I used to go that were visa-free, now I have to find the website and sign everything up before I can go, whereas before I didn't have to do that. But if that all becomes standardized so that we have one travel QR code for everywhere, then I think that's a good one. But difficult to see what it's going to be. I mean, there's so much going on, and I think we'll see things in 5 years' time that none of us could have foreseen today.
Now, I want to move on to another topic, sustainability, climate, and just get a sense from the panel of, are you guys in favor of having a more relaxed approach to climate, given it just seems that we are seeing a bit of a shift away from hard and fast targets? We've seen some airlines already pull away from targets in the near term because of the issues in the supply chain. I mean, do you guys hold any of these views?
I mean, I always like targets. I think the challenge for airlines when it comes to things like net zero is that there are huge areas in there that are not completely at the control of the airlines, so we can lobby for them. And I think it's a recognition from some of the airlines that when you do the maths, we're going to struggle to get there. But we talked a little bit earlier about air traffic control. The biggest quick fix for sustainability and fuel is air traffic control. We can wipe 10% off what we use tomorrow. But I think long term, when the biggest impact is going to be SAF, and I know that it gets talked about a lot and it's expensive. What's the Donald Trump effect going to be? But I look and you see all of the weather events around the world, and not everybody in the US supports the Trump view. And I think there's going to be increasingly more and more people pushing for solutions to move to net zero and maybe negative, because we need to get carbon out of the air, not just get to zero. And I think that, again, necessity and technology will keep pushing us forward. I think targets are great, and I think the adjustments in targets are not that people want to loosen things up. I think it's just a recognition that it's taking us a little bit longer than it should do.
So I think, firstly, to your previous question, one of the important things that I think we all need to look at is how well do you know your customer? I think airlines are a great place where you collect a lot of data about your customer, and how do you use that data? How do you leverage that for profitability is going to be a big opportunity for airlines. And increasingly, I think airlines are going to become really IT companies that also fly people. We need to start thinking along those lines. So that's going to be really, really important. On climate change, I think at this point, of course, SAF is really expensive, and in a cost-conscious market like India, it doesn't make as much sense. We need to keep working on it, but as Richard was saying, I think there are other large things that can be done. Air traffic control is one of them. Of course, improving engine technology is another, trying to get more fuel-efficient aircraft. I mean, those will make a tangible difference, a real tangible difference. We can keep beating up on SAF. It will just take a lot longer than these fixes, the air traffic control fix, or graduating to the new variety of engines that manufacturers are increasingly deploying, and so on. So in our view, there is enough tension on the supply side at this point of time, without for airlines to be burdened with the additional sort of responsibility on this. And I think, as Julia was saying in her comments earlier, airlines actually account for a very small proportion of the greenhouse impact. And of the airlines, the largest impact actually is not in the air at all. It's actually on the ground. So that is something that can be fixed. We should fix it. We should mandate it. We should fix it. But leave the aircraft alone for a while.
Yeah. Julia, what is the right balance between making climate pay and the industry, by and large, making its contribution, and also passengers making a contribution? We increasingly see taxes being put on, particularly around climate, in order to make passengers pay more to fly, in all in a sense, a green tax. What is the right balance, do you think, going forward?
Yeah, well, you know, if people put taxes on our sector, we have to pass it on to our customers. You know, with the kind of margins that people in this room are operating at, we don't have the luxury of absorbing stuff.
Ajay seems happier these days with his margins.
Well, I'm happier, but I'm not happy.
No.
I can be happier still.
Exactly.
To a serious point, yeah.
You know, just and going back before on SAT, I think you're right. I was on a panel with Michael O'Leary and Lynn Embleton, as you know, is the CEO of Aer Lingus. And it was quite funny because O'Leary was arguing it's all about the engines on sustainability. Your point, you know, they're going to get 20% more efficient, you know, so we don't need SAF. And Lynn was arguing, actually, you can't keep burning carbon. I mean, I think I was looking at the numbers. What do we burn now? 350 million. Have I got this right? 350 million metric tons, or 350? And it's going to rise to 500. And at the minute, SAF, we're only producing 1 million metric tons. So, you know, it's under 0.5%, and we all know that. So I don't think it is those opposing poles. It's a bit of everything. We do need to do it. And you know, I remember when I arrived at BA, I talked to the what do we call them, the environmental team then, and they got out documents from the 1970s. I mean, seriously, aviation has been taking the environment really, really seriously for a very, very long time, but we're not entirely masters of our own destiny in this, and that's why I tried to use my role, because aviation, so often we are in a bit of a bubble in aviation. I've always felt that, and we keep headbanging governments about things. But I try and now use my role with the value that travel and tourism brings to everybody's economies. You know, everybody's out there looking to grow travel and tourism. We heard about Sri Lanka. You know, it's just booming now. Look at Vietnam booming, India booming. So they're all doing it. So when we've got that opportunity and we get into governments, I always wag a big finger at them and say, you've got to support, incentivize SAF. We haven't got enough of the major power and oil producers. You know, it was wonderful seeing Neste from Finland, who are based up the road, as I said. But, you know, they're a small operator. You know, we need the big Saudi oil giants doing this. We really need, so I'm always banging our collective drum, because I just don't think we should be shamed when we are so conscientious. We've worked so hard. We have such an important role in society, and our margins are getting a bit bigger, but they're not big enough.
Yeah, and you know, SpiceJet actually flew India's very first flight on SAF. From Dehradun to New Delhi. There was a lot of excitement around it. We built that SAF in a little lab. And we just can't build enough of it. If there was somebody building SAF at scale, and it is the refineries that need to do it. Actually, it is the refineries that need to do it, and we are pushing them. In the meanwhile, I think the approach that at least India has taken is to blend. So you take aviation fuel and you blend it increasingly with a larger and larger proportion of clean oil, and we've mandated that now that it will be 2% by 2026, and then it will be 5% by 2028. So we are trying to take that path and not try and do it all at once.
Yeah, I think that's got to be the way to go. I mean, I think engines are great, but you know, we've got a problem at the moment on the new narrow-body fleets because Pratt & Whitney and LEAP are struggling because they've tried to get 15% and maybe they should have settled at 13%. But if you look at the next generation, how long is it going to be before everybody has replaced their aircraft and put new generation engines on that are not even certified yet, and we're still having problems with the old generations. It could be 20 years, 30 years. So the only game in town, apart from the 10% you can get from air traffic control, is SAF. So I think, this business where airports mandate 2%, 3%, 5% is the way to go, because that makes it a level playing field for all the airlines. Again, in this business, the margins, apart from maybe brief spikes, are too narrow for any one airline to go out and say, we're going to use SAF as a competitive tool. You can't do that. It's too expensive. So the only way to do it is to get the cost of SAF down. And the only way to get the cost of SAF down is to produce it. Yeah. And so I think that this 2-3% is the way to go, and governments need to subsidize development of it.
Are you any of you worried, given, like in the US, there is a large amount of SAF production happens there, and I think there's a little bit of lack of clarity at the moment about how Donald Trump, the US, the new US administration is going to approach its support for greener fuels, particularly SAF. I mean, are you worried that that would have a negative consequential market impact?
I'm not. I think the US have put a lot of investment. They're making a lot of good money. They're market leaders in renewables. And, what was it called? The Inflation Reduction Act, I think it was, strange name. But, it did actually incentivize a lot of business. He's not going to close business down. That's my view.
Yeah, I agree with her. That, I think the optics there are pretty much against SAF, actually, the way this whole drill, baby, drill slogan and so on. But there is just too much money already put into this, clean oil and so on and so forth. And the last thing they want to do is to start shutting down businesses.
I think you either believe we've got a problem, we need to move to SAF, or you don't. I don't think Trump has changed anybody's view on that. You probably still believe now what you believed before. And there's too many people who think this is too important that it's going to stop because of one administration in one country for 5 years, even if it is quite a big country and quite an important economy.
Now, we've got a few minutes left, and I want to just turn to safety and just get some reflections. We've had a pretty awful run of luck with, many fatal crashes. Obviously, this morning, waking up, we saw what happened in Toronto. As airline and aviation leaders, how do you reflect on what has been happening, and what do you tell, your staff every day, and even customers? I mean, I don't know if there's this increasing sense of worry. These small numbers of incidents. How do you approach these kind of conversations in the industry you lead?
It's not really come up that much day to day. I mean, I think the reality is that aviation is still incredibly safe by any measure. Obviously, the problem is when something goes wrong, there's a lot of people involved, and so it gets a lot of column inches. But if you look and you compare it to the number of people who have died on the roads in the same period of time, it will be nothing. But obviously, when it happens, it's tragic, and our hearts go out to all of the people and their families that are involved. But I think, the aviation focus on safety is very, very rigorous, and the systems are in there for consistent improvement. And I think, it's incumbent upon us all to make sure in our own airlines we continue to take it very seriously. But the reality is, if we don't, we won't be allowed to fly the places that we need to fly anyway. So I think, we've been served well by the regulatory authorities and the processes that have been built up over time. And just because we've had a bad couple of months, we shouldn't throw things out. We need to stay strong and keep doing what has been proven to work. I mean, if you look at the statistics over the last decades, the improvement has been massive. And I think we just need to keep going there, and we need to continue with the principle of, let's not speculate, let's let the investigators and the analysts go and work out what are the issues and what can we do to make sure that the same thing doesn't happen next time.
Yeah, so I think it's the issue really is that aviation is just more visible as a mode of travel. So if something happens at Toronto airport, the whole world gets to know about it. If there was a car crash in Toronto, I mean, of course, nobody would have really known. So I completely agree with Richard. It is one of the safest modes of travel. You can look that up by any measure of statistics that you might have. I think all we can do is to ensure that we follow the process that's been laid down. We keep trying to improve the process over a period of time, look at whatever accidents happen, and see if there was a systemic failure that we need to address. And if so, then we need to address that, and we need to, again, rigorously follow the process that has really been laid down. I think the message that needs to be sent to the staff at all points of time is that safety is absolutely the number one priority. And if there's one thing that can shut an airline down, it's an accident. So we need to make sure that there's absolutely zero tolerance when it comes to taking actions which are unsafe. But pretty much, other than that, I think in a place like India, it comes up even less because people just need to travel. They have very short memories as well. It's not a great thing to say, but if there is an accident, people come back to travel really, really fast because they don't take that as seriously.
And the other thing I would say is we should all be proud about the safety culture and leadership in our sector. Yeah. In the UK, the medical profession, as you probably know, have tried to learn from the safety culture. I always remember my very first day in a boardroom in BA, and there'd been an issue about an engineer who hadn't returned a spanner where it needed to be, and it had caused a problem. And the whole thing wasn't to admonish that engineer. The whole thing was, one, we talked about it very openly, and we tried to understand what was happening to that engineer in that moment that they failed to return that spanner where it needed to be. So it was a whole learning process. Mm-hmm. So the way we've embedded that openness and yes, zero tolerance, safety has to be first. But we're so strong at it because we're so open. And it's led by great leaders such as these two gentlemen here today who put it, top of their agenda.
And also a great leader yourself.
No.
Can't.
I was on the BA safety board, but I wasn't the expert, put it that way.
Everyone, I'd like you to give a warm round of applause to my panel again. Julius Simpson, Ajay Singh and Richard Nuttall.
Lovely.
Thank you very much indeed. And we'll be back at 12:15 with the CEO of Air India Express. Thank you very much indeed, everyone. Thank you.